In this podcast, I want to briefly clarify expectations for your second assessment task. This is an extension of the work that you already commenced for your first assessment task, where you developed the sequence of 3 lesson plans based on data and evidence that you collected on the 2 students who were the subject of your learner biographies. This time, we want you to write a report to your teacher mentor that highlights the learning that those 2 students have demonstrated as a result of your sequence of 3 lesson plans. So once again, you'll be drawing on the learner biographies that you constructed for Assessment Task 1, as well as drawing on any additional evidence that you've gathered of what progress the learner has made as a consequence of your implementation of those 3 lessons. So in the report, which I'm going to get to shortly, there are a number of things we want you to cover. We want you to recap the learning objectives and intentions that were in that sequence of 3 lesson plans. This is what you intended the students to learn. We also want you to reflect on the implementation of that sequence of 3 lesson plans using the 4 R's reflection tool with which you should be familiar from first semester. For those who aren't, we'll do a separate podcast on that. Again, you draw on the learner biographies of the students in your small group, and now we want you to add to all of that the evidence of progress that you have observed or collected. And we want you to write this in a report that you hand in on campus on the 12th of September. So your report is addressed to your teacher mentor, and the audience is also your site-based tutor. One of the questions that some students have asked is whether you can identify the name of the student. That is something that we'd like you to clarify with your site-based tutor and your teacher mentor. It may be that they would prefer that you use a pseudonym. It may be that they're fine with you writing the student's name in your assignment, but that's something that you need to clarify and clear within your own school. This document, which is available on the Ed Settings and Society Google sites, gives you a suggested structure for the report that you're going to write to your teacher mentor. We'd like you to start off with some context. This, in essence, is a bit of a summary, I guess, of the sequence of the 3 lesson plans that you developed for Assessment Task 1. So it's an overview in 300 to 400 words. Remind your mentor of the sequence of lessons that you planned and implemented. Hone in specifically on the intentions. What were the learning intentions? Link these back to the learner biographies. What was in the learner biographies that led you to those specific intentions, and hence the sequence of lessons? So that's your first section. The second section is your professional reflection. You're going to use the 4 R's framework to reflect on the lesson. The 4 R's framework template is on the course site as well under the Assessment Task 2 area. I'll make sure that's there for you. So we want you to follow that framework, 500 to 600 words. So remember, connect to self, connect to theory, where to from here. But focus on the learning progress. And that leads very neatly into the third section. Here we need you to collect some additional evidence. Maybe that's samples of the work that the students did throughout your sequence of 3 lessons. It could be your observations and your own reflections from those lesson plans. Link back to the baseline data that you collected in the learner biographies. What has changed in the students' learning as a result of those 3 lesson plans? What's the evidence of their learning telling you? And this is where we really want you to focus in this section. How do you know that they've learnt what you taught them? Linking back to the cartoon that is on the focus area of your workshop 6. Any evidence that you have collected, attach that in appendices. And it should only be the data that supports what's in your report. We don't need a whole range of other data. So draw on the data that shows evidence of the progress that the students have made as a result of those 3 lesson plans that you've implemented. That's your assignment. A handy hint for students at universities is to get hold of the assessment criteria that your tutors will use to grade your assignments. I'm just going to put up the first part of the rubric for your assessment task 2 as a reminder to read through precisely what we're looking for. This type of assessment rubric leaves very little ambiguity about what your tutors are seeking. The thing that I tend to do is I look for what's expected if I was aiming for a high distinction. So I'd look over here in this column. This is what a top-notch assignment will look like if it has all of these things. So in addition to reading the description of the task and being familiar with the template that we're recommending, a really good habit is to read through the high distinction section of your assessment criteria. And this provides you with a really clear idea of what we're looking for under each criteria. So that's just a heads up to remind you about being familiar, making sure you understand what's expected of you.